It's the blue collar breakdown! Welcome to the blue collar breakdown! Starting right now!
Hello, welcome to the Blue Collar Breakdown. I'm Tom Eddlem, the Blue Collar Economist. I'm going to be with you for the next 30 minutes. I want to tell you a little housekeeping thing. I've got an article coming up at the Libertarian Institute maybe tomorrow, but it's imminent. So definitely keep checking the Libertarian Institute for a piece that actually I'm going to touch on tonight. I'll get into it a little bit more detail in the piece, but I definitely want you to check that out. Tonight I want to talk about socialism, the election of Zohran Mamdami, and also the shutdown and SNAP benefits. So let's start with socialism. And I think it's probably best to start with the definition of socialism. If we're going to talk about Zohran Mamdami and whether he's a socialist and whether socialism is a threat to America, and we should probably start with an actual definition of socialism. So here's a definition from Investopedia, okay? A populist economic and political system based on collective common and public ownership of the means of production. So government owns the means of production, okay? That's what Investopedia says. So, all right, but am I cherry picking? Let's go to more of an official definition. This one's a little bit more detailed. You can read along with me if you're watching, but if you're not, I'll just read it. This is from Merriam-Webster, and it says any of various egalitarian economic and political theories or movements advocating collective or governmental ownership and administration of the means of production and distribution of goods. And there's a second definition: a system of society or of a group in which there is no private property, or a system or condition of society in which the means of production are owned or controlled by the state. So it's sort of like number one. And then, of course, there's a third definition: a stage of society in Marxist theory that is transitional between capitalism and communism and is distinguished by unequal distribution of goods and pay according to work done. So what do we have here for a definition? We have, I came across this third one that pretty much sums up the essential elements of socialism and also the essential elements of capitalism. All right. This I got off of, oh man, what is it? It's I think it was a website called Basic, but I like the definition. Good. All right, socialism is a system of economics where the means of producing goods and services are under public ownership, okay? Whereas capitalism is a system of economics where the capital goods are privately owned by businesses or individuals, okay? So these are the differences between, or this is the one major difference between socialism and capitalism. In socialism, government owns the means of production. They own the steel mills. They own the automobile factories. They own whatever is being made. They own the film industry. They own the deodorant factories. Everything. Capitalism, it's the opposite. Everything's privately owned. The government doesn't really do anything. It's a neutral arbiter. And what we've got for the most part in Western societies is capitalism, not socialism. Which is not to say there aren't some socialist elements. I mean, my local power company, Taunton Municipal Lighting Plant, is a government-owned institution, a monopoly, and that is a means of production. They produce the power. In a lot of Western societies, you have, in fact, almost every advanced economy except the United States has government healthcare. That's a means of production. So you could say there's a little bit of socialism, but for the most part, socialism is not very present, certainly in America. I mean, I can think of at the national level, the only thing that is socialized is Amtrak, the passenger train, the national passenger train. I'm trying to think of something else that is, and I can't think of anything. There may be one or two other things, but we are a capitalist society, and yet we are not a free market society. Not even close, right? I mean, and I go into this long discourse, 5-minute discourse over the definition of socialism, because I think it's important to define your terms first, because I'm going to go into why I think socialism is a paper tiger, really even not even a paper tiger. It is a straw man in American politics, and it is being deployed deliberately and deceptively to distract us from the real problem in American society. Okay. And part of the reason for that is also if you have a problem in your society, just like if you have a problem in your body and you don't diagnose it properly, you're not going to solve the problem. And it's like, you've got a cancer and you go to your doctor and all he'll talk about is how you have to avoid heart disease. And, you say, well, but doctor, I've got cancer. And he goes, well, don't you care about heart disease? Are you in favor of heart disease? It's like, no, I don't have heart disease. Heart disease is not a threat to me. All right. I have low blood pressure and all this. But I do have cancer and I've got to get rid of cancer. By the way, I don't have cancer, but if the doctor kept pressing you about heart disease when you had cancer, you'd find another doctor because he's not going to diagnose the problem. And that's where I see society going in 2025 after the election of Zohran Mamdami, because he is actually a socialist. He's called for a couple of things, not a lot, but a couple of things that are legitimately socialist. He's called for government-owned grocery stores in New York City. So, is it a means of production? No, but it's a means of distribution. Distribution is kind of like production. If you don't distribute it, you don't get it. He's called for that. We can call that socialism. I think that's legitimately socialism, in that if the New York City Council goes along with it and sets up all these grocery stores that are owned by the city of New York, all across the city of New York, that this would be socialism. Okay. I don't think it's a threat to America in any way. Every time government-owned grocery stores have been attempted, and there are a number of rural towns across America that have done it over the years, every single one of them has lost money. Every single one of them has had health violations. If Mamdami wins support on the city council to get this thing done, it will be an epic failure. It will not, and not an epic failure in the sense that it will destroy the city. It won't. Mamdami does not have the power to destroy New York City. A lot of people are going histrionic, I've noticed, at least on social media, saying, oh, they just elected a guy who has the power to destroy the greatest city in America. No, dude, he doesn't. He's the mayor. He's the executive branch. The city council makes the laws. All right. He has to get support for this kind of stuff. And what he has proposed, other than a few things extraneously, they're not going to change the fundamental nature of the city. All right. People need to get serious. But then we get to the point where, like, okay, what the Republicans are going to start doing is saying, well, the Democrats are socialist. We have to support Republicans because we have to oppose socialism, and socialism is a threat. And, my attitude to that is pretty much summed up in this meme I made. All right. It's a picture of Joseph, for those of you listening, it's a picture of Joseph Stalin saying, I'm not coming back from the dead to nationalize the means of production. get your head out of the Cold War. Socialism is not a threat because the Democratic Party is not socialist. In fact, the Democratic Party, for the most part, opposed, certainly all of the political establishment opposed Mamdami. He got very, very few endorsements from either Republicans or Democrats. It was all independent people almost all independent people. I mean, there were a few. Bernie Sanders and AOC endorsed him, but most of the Democrats endorsed Andrew Cuomo, who ran as an independent after he lost the Democratic primary. And one of the things, the people who think socialism is a threat to America right now, they're either boomers who haven't left the Cold War or people who don't understand American politics at all right now. Because America is not going to nationalize the means of production. The two political parties in America, the Republicans and Democrats, the major two parties, are not controlled by socialists. They are controlled by the billionaires. They are controlled by billionaires who are capitalists. All right. They want subsidies. They want all kinds of, again, look at the definition here. Capitalism is a system of economics where capital goods are privately owned by businesses or individuals. Socialism is a system of economics where the means of producing goods and services are under public ownership. The billionaires running both parties do not want socialism. The billionaires in charge of both parties, who are their donors, who are their policemen, who run the media and the debate, do not want socialism. All right. This is why when Barack Obama ran for president, he campaigned for a public option, and we didn't get one. We got public. Obamacare was private care, even though it was government regulated, government subsidized. Now, don't get me wrong. The billionaires love subsidies. If you look at Forbes' list of the richest Americans, almost all of them have 9 or 10 figure annual federal subsidies. You can go right down the list. Elon Musk. Well, gee, he's got his Tesla, which gets green energy subsidies. He's gotten tens of billions out of that. He's got this rocket company that's got federal subsidies. He's got Elon Musk is the world's greatest tax farmer. You go down the list. Who else? Oh, the guy who owns Amazon, Bezos. Oh, well, Amazon Web Services has a huge contract with the American intelligence agencies and with the U.S. military. And you could go right down the list. Almost all the billionaires have huge contracts and subsidies, and they also get favorable regulations that tilt the economy in their favor and against small businesses. And I'm actually going to write about this very soon. So look for it about a month. But the system is rigged against small businesses and working people. And as a result, we have the system where the billionaires are getting richer and the middle class is stagnant. And that's why Zohran Mamdami won. It wasn't because New York City suddenly went socialist. No, New York City's got Wall Street. All right. It's got super rich people. Super rich people don't want socialism because they got all the stuff that would be nationalized. That's just not how it works. And people who think the Democrats want socialism don't understand who owns the Democratic Party. They don't have a clue. They need to get a clue, because if they want to fight the Democrats, they should at least know who's controlling the Democratic Party. Because, like Sun Tzu said, a person who knows himself and his enemy will be victorious in 100 of 100 battles. A person who knows himself and not his enemy will be victorious in half of his battles. A person who knows neither himself nor his enemy will be victorious in 0 out of 100 battles. I'm summarizing, but that's basically where we're at. And the Democratic Party, what happened was Zohran Mamdami, the reason why he won is he appealed to working people and said, look, I know you're suffering. I'm going to give you a few things. I'm going to try to help you. Now, there were dumb ideas. They're absolutely dumb ideas. But the reality is nobody else in the race offered working people anything. Andrew Cuomo offered them nothing. Curtis Sliwa offered them nothing. Eric Adams offered them nothing. They basically said, you'll have nothing and you'll like it. And especially young people went for Mamdami saying, hey, I'll go with this guy. Why will they go with this guy? Because at least he's talking my game. At least he's thinking about my interests. Now, I think he's going to totally sell out. I think he's not going to do anything. I think to the extent that he does anything, it will be harmful to young people. But keep in mind, this, the young people voted for Mamdami. And if you look at the 2020, even better than the 2024 election, the 2016 election, the young people voted for Trump. Why? Because Trump went out to the Rust Belt and he said, hey, I know you're suffering. I'm going to do something for you. And he did give us a little tax cut in the first term. Now he's giving us tax increases. So the young people are abandoning him. Trump has not fulfilled any of his promises with regard to the economic needs of young people. So they're abandoning MAGA for anybody that will do anything. And it's the same electoral path to success everywhere in the world. If you go to Argentina, Javier Milei said, hey, the government's stealing from you. That's why you're poor. I'm going to help you, let you get rich on your own. You can keep your own money. You can work hard and you can succeed. That's why he won. He appealed directly to working people who are suffering under very heavy inflation. It's not about socialism. It's not that the young people are leftists. It's not that. It's that they're in desperate straits. They can't afford houses. Let me just give you a couple of charts here. Actually, I think I just brought one chart. Here's real median wages. All right. One of the things that the Biden administration did was they said, hey, the economy's great, blah, 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 blah. And that's what Trump's doing too. All right. And if you look here on real median wages, back in the third quarter of 2020, is that 2020 or 2021? Fourth quarter of 2020, the real wages, this is inflation adjusted, were at 376 compared to they pick a year and then they make that 100, and they have just in the most recent data gotten back up to 326. In other words, what happened was in 2020 the workers were doing really well. Then the COVID thing, shutdown hit, and everybody went on furlough, and they printed a whole bunch of money. And what happened was Wall Street got all the gains, the government got all the gains of all the new money, and workers' wages bought less because of inflation. And wages, purchasing power, fell for 4.5 years, and they have just now recovered to that level. So when the Biden administration in 2024 was saying, or the Kamala Harris was saying, hey, the economy's great. It's never been better. We have the strongest economy ever. All the young people were saying, no, it isn't. Not for me. I'm not voting for you. And they went back to Trump, okay? Because the Trump years were actually decent. I mean, it was one of the few presidential administrations where median wages, real median wages increased. That hasn't happened much since 1971 when they went off the gold standard, because whenever inflation hits, it lowers wages, and it takes a long time for wage earners to bargain themselves back up to where they were with wage increases. A lot of times that you're in a contract for a certain period of time, or you just have to convince your employer that the dollar doesn't buy as much. You're essentially getting a pay cut if you don't get a pay raise. And that's why wage earners have suffered. The other stat, and I'm going to talk about this in my piece that's published by the Libertarian Institute coming up maybe this week, is the dramatic fall off in millennial and Gen Z home ownership rates compared to Gen X and boomers. The fall off has been precipitous. And one of the articles I'm using as a touch point for the piece that I wrote is this Reason Magazine article. This is a Facebook ad for it. And it says, now this is John Stossel. He's been around since the 1980s. When he was doing 2020. He says, newsflash, Gen Z overall is doing better than young people once did. A typical 25-year-old Gen Zer has an annual household income that's 50% above baby boomers. And Americans today actually spend a smaller percentage of our money on food, clothing, and housing than we used to. Every single phrase in that clause is misleading in the most malicious way possible. Now, I'm not saying they're out and out lies, because they use relative terms and they use cherry point data picks. Let's go on. Let me just go over these. Gen Z overall is doing better than young people once did. Well, that's certainly true. In 1800, young people didn't have a lot of money. Okay. Are they doing better than Gen Z, Gen X, or baby boomers? Maybe a speck. But not with regard to housing. They're doing much worse with regard to housing. But if you look at inflation-adjusted income, they're doing a speck better if you measure according to the most favorable inflation metric. Because what John Stossel does in this article is he uses a GDP deflator, or what's called personal consumption expenditures, which is the Federal Reserve's most favored inflation statistic, which dramatically undercounts inflation compared to the CPI. I mean, it's in the last since the year 2000, it undercounts inflation by about 9%. So by using the most favorable status, you can say things. A typical 25-year-old Gen Zer has an annual income that's 50% above baby boomers. That's only, again, if you use the wrong, because you're going way back. Why would you go way back to baby boomers? That's the grandparents. Baby boomers are the grandparents. Gen Zs are that's their grandparents. Why wouldn't you compare them to their parents? Because they're not much better off than their parents, okay? And also, it says here, Americans today actually spend a smaller amount of their money on food, clothing, and housing than we used to. Now, obviously, Gen Zers are spending less money on housing than they used to because they're living in their mom's basement. Of course they're spending less, and they're spending less on food because mom is a good cook, all right? But food prices have stopped falling as a percentage of family income back in the 1990s. Now, John Stossel can say, well, I remember blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, he's in his late 60s. So, of course, when I was a kid, he uses like when I was a kid. I'm like, yeah, because that was a long time ago, dude. And the economy has stalled for working people since 1971. So when he says, when I was a kid, yeah, you were a kid in the 50s, okay? So it's not the same, all right? So that's why it's all misleading, and I go into it in great detail. I think that's the piece. Yeah, that's the piece that the Libertarian Institute is going to publish next. So definitely keep an eye out for that. Okay, I don't want to go too much longer here, but I did promise to get to SNAP benefits. Let me just start with the obvious as a libertarian. Yes, I believe they should be abolished, but no, this is not the way to abolish them. This abolishing them temporarily by government shutdown is the dumbest way and most dysfunctional way to do it. But it does prove that we have a zombie Congress. Congress is just simply not passing the bills and passing the spending. They're just letting it go on and on without any action. That it is the symptom of the end of our republic. All right. I'm not as a libertarian, I'm less worried about some family getting $200 a month in SNAP benefits than I am Elon Musk getting billions of dollars in rocket contracts from the federal government. I think the latter is much more objectionable. And I'm going to focus on abolishing the latter rather before the former. I want the former abolished too, don't get me wrong. But I think that if you look at the federal war on poverty, I don't want to blame poor people for struggling, because the government has made it punitive with the way they tax workers. There's a 15.3% tax rate on the first dollar you make. There's no deductions. There's all these memes going around the internet about how the rich pay most of the income taxes, blah, 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 blah. Well, first of all, the billionaires don't pay income taxes, all right? They pay capital gains. I mean, Elon Musk paid income taxes maybe 3 times in the last decade, all right? And one of them was so they could sell his stock and buy Twitter. They pay capital gains tax, not income tax. But also, payroll taxes are the second biggest source of revenue, and working people tend to pay some income tax, and they pay the most payroll taxes. They're capped. Now everyone will say, "Oh, well, but those go in a Social Security lockbox, and they get them back when they're 65." No, they don't. They don't. All right, they don't. The government takes the money and spends it right away, and then they promise you they'll give you money when you retire, which you probably won't get, because Rand Paul is talking about moving the retirement age to 70, whatever. You're not getting it back. All right. And the other line they always give you is, well, but half of those taxes are paid by your employer. Well, first of all, I'm self-employed, so that half of them are not. But secondly, no, they're not paid by the employer. The employer calculates that into the salary and the cost of the employee. And if those taxes were abolished, the salaries of those employees would go up commensurately. They would go up by that 7.55%. 7.55? I think it's 6.5, 7.65%. All right, because that's the cost of the employee to the employer, and it would be just a simple transfer over. So no, but if you look at people who are just getting by, getting a couple $100 a month of SNAP benefits, most of them are paying in more taxes than they're taking out in the form of SNAP benefits. I created this meme for the Libertarian Institute a couple months ago. Federal war on poverty is a dependency scam. Consider a family of 4 at 115% of the federal poverty rate. They've got a family of 4. They make $37,000, which is almost nothing. The payroll tax is $5,700, and they get a couple $100 a month in SNAP benefits that totals $3,400. So that's like $270 or whatever a month. But they net paying the government $2,200. So they're not freeloaders. I mean, not any more than Elon Musk is a freeloader or Jeff Bezos is a freeloader. I mean, those guys are getting billions. So I'm not gonna go after SNAP guys. I mean, eventually, yes, but let's get rid of the billionaire subsidies first. And the number one subsidy, in my mind, is the inflation and interest rate manipulation. That's the number one thing that's hurting working people, more even, I think, than the payroll taxes, because it's an immediate payroll reduction, and it takes forever for the workers to bargain themselves back to where they were. Okay. I think that's about it. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you for listening, and join in next week, Wednesday. I'm going to see if I can get a guest. Haven't decided what I'm going to do, but thank you for listening. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hey, buy me a coffee.
In America, we have to party fun. We have the stupid